A home for one. It was the day of the arrival of the Alagasia party in Mount Anga, but Arya and Fernan got ahead of themselves to meet Eragon and Saphira at the Tealdari Hill, as agreed a few hours before the rest. Seeing her for the first time in 10 years was a rush. His members tingled with excitement, but the first thing she said to him, even before jumping to the ground, made him relax and remember why he loved her unusual company. "You shaved." He laughed at her discontentment and scrubbed his face with both hands. It was an accident. He waited until she dismounted from Fernan and performed the elven greetings before her this time. After the words were said, she frowned and brushed his clean-shaved face with her fingers. "What kind of accident? Couldn't you use magic to fix it?" The razor slipped and, well, I had to shave it all after that. He laughed again. "It's only hair, Arya. It will grow back." He wasn't sure if he should try to hold her the way he longed to do, but her casual disposition, talking about his beard as it was the most important thing, encouraged him to do so. Eragon came close to Arya and put his arms around her, surprisingly feeling her reciprocate the gesture almost immediately. She breathed heavily inside his arms as she was feeling relieved. He just didn't know why. "I missed you," he said in her ear. Arya backed away but still had her hand on his arms. He saw a shimmer in her eyes. "And I missed you." He smiled and with a great effort got himself free from her warmth to go greet Fernan. They entangled their minds and shared pleasantries. The dragon showed him an image of a green patch by the hill he had never seen before and questioned what would that be. At that, Eragon smiled like a naughty child and looked back at Arya, closing their minds to her. "That's a surprise. Do you think she will like?" The image of the treehouse and the garden filled their connection. "As long as you tell her now, I don't see why not." Fernan was right, because Arya already had a mad stare to the both of them, curious to know the content of their secret conversation. Eragon walked to her and grabbed her hands in his. "How will you do this, little one?" Saphira asked, accommodating herself on the ground by Fernan's side. "I'll let her free to choose what to do with it." "Good luck, Ari." He smiled and squeezed her hands to soothe her. "Arya, I know I promised I wouldn't ask for more of you 10 years ago, for more than you were capable of giving me. So I won't. But I have a gift for you that I wish you to interpret not as anything more than what it is, just a gift. I'm not asking for more." Arya didn't say anything, and Eragon thought she was waiting for him to continue. "In all the times I told you how I feel for you, I don't think I could make myself clear." "I don't think you know. Eragon," she interrupted. "I know." He let go of her hand and ran his fingers through his hair. "I don't think you do." She smiled kindly. "I know your name. All of them. The old ones. This new one. I know." It was true. She didn't have to be with him anymore to read him, which was both satisfying and scary. Once she had figured him out 10 years before, reading his next changes was easy and natural. Also, he didn't feel as afraid of telling her how he felt, for she kept an open path for him to do so at all times. She made him feel heard. His only fear was that she would eventually see in him a new detail that she hadn't seen before and decide that she didn't like it, that it was too much for her. It was a complete waste of energy to think that. He knew it, since it hadn't happened yet, but he couldn't help to feel so insecure before her. And that, Arya knew as well. On the other hand, he was a little in the dark with her still, because Arya was a master in disguising her emotions, very different from him. She had to gather all her courage to tell him about her feelings, or to show him what she would commonly call weakness. However, Eragon knew she kept him close to her heart and was susceptible to his luring games. It helped that the Eldenari, without his request or consent, would show him parts of her past. It helped because it allowed him to understand who she was and the choices she had made throughout her life. However, it would feel like cheating, like betraying her trust. He still had to apologize for that later. Right. But you know the result, the product, not the process, or at least not all of it. She frowned. What do you mean? In order for you to understand this gift, you need to understand how I came to feel the way I feel about you. I just don't know how to phrase it. Why don't you show her, like we do to each other? Saphira suggested and flashed a speeding amount of memories inside his mind. Brilliant, he celebrated. He knew exactly what to show Arya. He wanted her to know, but somehow he thought words couldn't express all of it. Arya knew him well. She even knew a lot of the memories he was about to show her, but not the emotions behind it, and how they made him come to feel what he ultimately felt for her. So he asked permission to show her, to invite her into his mind and present to her his memories. He warned her, however, that it might not be a pleasant experience. He would show her moments of enchantment, of course, but mostly scenes of hurt, when he feared for her life and when he cried for her. She agreed, and he opened his mind to her melodic intrusion, surrounding them both with his own defenses, a tall and dense hedge, full of thorns and poison ivy on the outside, but adorned with the most beautiful lilies, and why not, black morning glories on the inside. He felt Arya's mind sing in a high and bright note when she noticed the flowers. On the physical realm, she grasped his sleeves, for she knew he crafted the scenario just for her. He was glad she liked it, for it was a sample of what she would find in the garden later. Fernan and Saphira discreetly retreated themselves from their bond with their riders. Eragon and Arya were alone in their mental space. They both had their eyes closed and foreheads leaning against each other, so he began the parade of memories. Eragon took his time showing each memory very precisely, as close as it actually had happened. First, she saw the top of a tree moving close like she was riding a horse on a trail, looking up to the bright sky. A sigh came out of her mouth, but it wasn't hers, it was his. She was seeing and feeling from his perspective, as it should be, since this was how he remembered. He looked to his side, and she saw Brom riding along, his white beard dangling on his chest, his blue eyes squinting under the daylight. Brom pulled his beard and asked if Eragon had really said if she was in a prison. Arya assumed they were talking about herself. She opened her mouth involuntarily to answer, but heard Eragon's human voice coming out. Yes, he confirmed. He then proceeded to tell Brom how he hadn't seen her face clearly. Although he could tell she was beautiful, but her eyes were very clear to him, he could see them without any trouble. Arya suspected they were talking about Eragon trying to see her by scrying, even though they had never met before. He knew her only from his dreams. She felt his anxiety when he asked about who Brom imagined she could be, but got disappointed when he got a negative. Eragon then suggested in a playful tone that they should look in every jail cell and dungeons until they found her, to which Brom laughed. But she felt he really would do that if it was up to him. He would go any lengths to find her, a woman he had never met before. She raised her actual hands to his shoulders and gave it a little squeeze. He brought his own to her waist and let them rest there, loosely. The memory turned to a new one. Now, Arya watched Eragon examining his appearance in the mirror. It was a dirty and cracked mirror on the back of an old tavern. She could barely recognize him, if it weren't for his unmistakable warm brown eyes. He was a young and completely human version of the Eragon she had in her arms. His eyes were determined, but also tired and unmistakably human. He covered his head in a hat she had never seen before, but suspected it was part of a uniform, a messenger's uniform, maybe. She was right, because shortly after he finished disguising himself, he got out of the tavern into the morning light and walked toward a small and dark building that looked like the city's jailhouse, holding a piece of parchment decorated with an official seal she could only see because he had glanced down. When he approached the building, she heard Saphira's voice ringing inside her head, his head. "Are you sure you want to do this, little one? Are you really going to search every cell you can find? I'm sure." He was decided, but she couldn't help to notice some desperation as well. Is she really worth it? I already told you, Saphira. I don't know why, but I care about her. I can't explain it, probably never will, so if there's anything I can do, I will do it, even if it means searching every single jail cell and dungeon I can find from here to Gilead and back again." Arya felt that Saphira was proud of him, but also terribly worried. "Fine then, if it means so much to you, it means a lot to me too. Let's find her. But don't forget our main goal, to find Brom's contact in Gilead and go to the Varden. If we find her on the way, great, but if we don't, we will forget about her." Eragon sighed as he stepped inside the building. Arya felt the cold air coming from the dark, and humid cells down the stairs hit his exposed arms below his folded sleeves. "Fine," he said unwillingly. "Eragon. Promise, all right, only on the way to Gilead and to the Varden, and then I'll forget about it, about her." The last word was a faint whisper, and Arya felt her own eyes sting. She was touched by his determination to save her. The memory changed again. She was in a cell that she recognized being the one she was held captive in Gilead. She let out a gasp, and her heart started to pound. Eragon's arms closed behind her back in a comforting embrace. He said with his actual voice, and she felt his breath brush her face, "It's not you, it's me. It's my memory of captivity." Arya took a deep breath and tried to control herself. She had forgotten for an instant that he had been held in Gilead as well. Back in Eragon's body, she felt a fogginess. Her head was light, and her limbs were heavy. The elf heard a noise coming from outside his cell, and her eyes were focused on the steel door as Eragon lifted his head from the cot he was lying on. She noticed his clothes were terribly worn out from traveling, and he seemed too slim as his body entered her field of vision. So different from the strong man, she held that it made her feel bad. He got up slowly and looked out of the small window on the door. She saw soldiers. She knew them, and her heart sped up again. They carried someone among them, someone unconscious. She saw herself, and a nausea hit her. She clenched her teeth and sank her nails in Eragon's shoulders, who instinctively closed the embrace even more in the memory. Arya felt Eragon's heart also speeding up, and a resolution taking over his foggy mind. He was going to get himself free, and he would save her, no matter what. The next memories passed as flashes. Eragon throwing his poisoned food and water out of the window, feeling his stomach devour itself of hunger, accessing his magical power to open the cell door, her green eyes paralyzing him completely when he saw her in her cell. She felt his relief for finally finding her, and also his rapture for seeing her and all her beauty in person for the first time. And also compassion. Arya softened her touch on his shoulders and felt his warmth on her palms. They've come a long way, and watching the beginning from his perspective was at the same time uncomfortable and heartwarming because she could feel his affection even before they met. How could it be? Were they really meant to be? The scene turned to a completely different situation where they were riding at full speed through a valley. But before the image set on her mind, she saw a glimpse of another memory, as he chose not to show her something in the last second, her back severely wounded as his palms hovered over it, healing her. Why he didn't want her to see it she didn't know, but didn't express any thoughts since the new memory was raging in front of her mind. The trees were a blur as the horses passed them by. Her head turned to see Saphira flying low with Arya's own body strapped lifeless on the dragon's belly. She felt his emotions turning to agony when a thought crossed his mind. What if we don't make it? I already said it. You chose to ride the horses so Murtagh wouldn't be alone to fight the Urgles. Now deal with it. Saphira used a hard voice to speak to him. I know I chose that. How could I leave him behind? But how can I live knowing that I could have taken Arya to the Varden way faster if I had chosen to ride you instead? He had a lump in his throat, and Arya fought the urge to swallow. I guess life is about choosing your battles and learning to deal with the outcome. Saphira said in resignation, I want to fight both of them. With that said, he kicked his horse and made him run even faster. The memories changed again. Her sight went dark, and an excruciating pain tore her back from shoulder to hip, and she gasped once more, lunging forward into Eragon's arms. It took her half a minute for her to realize what memory was that. Her eyes opened in the middle of the blinding pain and focused on a blast of light and glass way over her head. Her eyes darted from the explosion to the creature next to her as she turned, flaming scarlet blade in hand. She watched as her right hand, not her sword hand, but his raised and shot a piercing blow to the shade's heart. She felt his realization that he had done something impossible, and she got proud of him. Before succumbing to the darkness again, they looked up with their shared perspective and watched as Saphira raced down with Arya on her back, palms up and a fierce look. Without even thinking about the danger of being cut in a million pieces by the shards, he felt gratitude fill his mind, knowing he would never be able to kill Durza if it weren't for her. And Arya received this feeling from both memory Eragon and her Eragon, safe and sound in her arms. The tears she tried to hold back before rolled down her cheek. Arya opened her eyes to see his own brown ones staring back at her. He gave her a sad smile. "I told you it wouldn't be pleasant." She nodded and hugged him, placing her cheek on his neck. "Funny how Fernan showed you the same memory but from a different perspective years ago." "I guess it's an important one, isn't it?" She nodded but didn't step back. "Is there more?" She knew it was just the beginning of it all, but wanted to hear from him. "Much more." Eragon backed away slightly to look at her and wipe a tear from her face. "I can stop, though." "I think you already have an idea." He smiled again. His voice was soft. "No, I want to see it." "Show me." The next and last memory jumped in time many months and many happenings that she suspected he was embarrassed by, such as their encounter in Du Weldenvarden at the Blood Oath celebration, or the time she broke the faith he had made of her. She didn't want to see it either if it caused him pain, and because it caused her discomfort as well, she understood his reluctancy. Instead of those memories, or many others, he chose one that she had no idea existed. It was after the appearance of the spirits, when Arya had gone to find him in the Empire. They talked by the fire, and she opened up to him for what she remembered being the first time, or the first really significantly time. He consoled her and gave her a flower. It was kind and delicate of him. She would never forget. When they were done talking and settled to rest for the night, he excused himself and moved away from the camp. Arya felt his legs taking them into the forest, and her curiosity grew, because her own memory of that moment was uneventful from that point on. He stayed away for a couple of minutes, and then came back to lay down and rest like she was doing, nothing more. But what he showed her couldn't be called uneventful. Her sight became a blur as she felt a knot in her throat, his throat. He was crying. The tears started to roll down his cheeks as she felt them warm on her own, and she bit her finger to muffle the sound. His finger. Her head, his head, turned to look behind, and the faint light of the fire could be seen undisturbed. She didn't hear him cry in the past. But why was he crying? She felt their legs bending until he was kneeling by a tree, his forehead pressed against its trunk. Tears flowed freely as she tried to suppress the sobs. As he tried to suppress the sobs, so she wouldn't hear him cry. That memory was the most immersive of all. Arya was confused, not knowing who controlled the body or who felt the emotions. In the end, did it really matter? Arya opened her eyes again and stared at Eragon. He seemed to feel her stare and opened his eyes as well. He had a pained expression on his face. "Why?" she whispered. He swallowed and clenched his jaw. "I felt guilty." He looked down. "For what?" "For making you go through all of that so I could find Saphira's egg. So I could be where I was. And I felt terribly bad for you, wanted to take it all away." Arya was shocked. How could he ever think any of what she had been through in Gilead was his fault? Or the fact that she had lost Glenwing and Fairlin. She grabbed both sides of his face and made him look at her. "None of that was your fault." "None." "You hear me?" His eyes were sad, but he nodded slowly. "I knew the risks when I took the task of ferrying the egg." Besides, the only ones to blame are Durza and Galbatorix, who are both dead because of you. Her voice became soft and sweet. It looks like I have a debt I will never be able to pay. A frown appeared on his face. You were never in debt. Never had to pay anything. Take this idea out of your head. Besides, I didn't do anything alone. You were there too. You avenged yourself. She smiled at him, and it was warm and inviting. Arya pressed her forehead on his again, caressing the back of his head. His hair felt soft to her touch, just like she knew it would, just how she remembered. I don't think I can. She whispered to his mouth and closed her eyes. They were so close, they were breathing each other's air. She felt him leaning in slowly, hesitating, and then he stopped. What was wrong? Arya opened her eyes. She moved her head away, just a bit, so she could see him. And there he was, looking back at her with expectation, but also with anxiety. She caressed his hair again, and his eyes shut closed at the pleasure of her touch. Couldn't he tell she wanted it? What is it? She asked quietly. He opened his eyes once more, and they became focused on her lips, clouded with wanting. When he spoke, his voice was very low and hoarse. I don't want to do anything that will send you away. After 10 years, I don't know where we stand, and I promised I wouldn't ask you for more. His arms firmed the grip on her lower back to prove his point. She smiled again and understood that all the first steps were hers to take. He had promised and was intending to keep his word. But she also had a promise to keep, and I promised I wouldn't take back what we had conquered so far. With that in mind, she ran her hand through his hair and brought him even closer. Their faces were touching. All was left for her was to lift her chin up a little bit, and her lips would meet his. She took her time when she felt his breathing becoming shorter and faster. Her own breaths were shallow and more frequent. From the contact of his body on hers, she felt his heart pound at full speed in his chest, and she was sure he could feel hers doing the same. Arya crossed the last limit and pressed her lips delicately on his. It was very different from the kiss they had shared 10 years before, for that one was full of repressed desire and hurt. This one was a confirmation, a reunion. A lot less desperate. He held his breath and didn't move. She then pulled his head to herself and made the pressure stronger. He then let out the air and inhaled again, tilting his head to the right and parting his lips slightly. She mimicked him and moved her lips so she could cover his bottom lip with hers. Their mouths danced like this for a while, trying to meet each other like it was the first time, like an overdue introduction. They split for a while, and she had time to see him again. Eragon had his eyes still closed, lips parted and a charming shade of pink on his cheeks. She realized that even with a clean shave, his skin was still scratchy and her own skin felt tender from the contact, but it didn't bother her at all. She decided she also liked this version of him. Arya closed the distance once again and kissed him, but this time she let her tongue go meet his inside his mouth. Eragon moaned, affected by the pleasure it gave him, but didn't retract. Instead, he reciprocated her every move. His sounds entered her ears and exploded inside of her just like their first time, and like the first time, it caused a wave of pleasure to run throughout her body. Knowing that she was the one causing his own pleasure, it felt even better than before. His taste, the texture of his tongue and the roughness of his face, and also the sound of his plead. It all brought memories back, but it was even more intense after all that time, and she was sure missing him for so long added a special ingredient to his taste. The smell of his skin so close to her nose was another thing Arya could never forget, neither take for granted. His scent of wet grass and rain was at the same time new to her and an old friend. It was Eragon, so distinctive and so simple. It inebriated her. When they parted in definitive, the most radiant smile filled his face. I missed you, he whispered again. Arya responded with a soft kiss on his lips. Let's make the most of it then. Where is the present you said you have for me? Arya kept quiet for an unsettling amount of time. She was standing in front of the treehouse by the river at the foot of the hill, looking, inspecting. Frozen, Eragon didn't know what to do. He was standing behind her to give her space, but his desire was to go ahead and explain himself, explain his reasons and every little detail he put in the house just for her. Like I said before, this means nothing more than what it is, a gift. It's just a house, so you can feel comfortable when spending time here in the East. And it's your choice if you want to stay here or in the mountain like the last time. But if you choose to stay here, there's a dragon shelter for Fernan and Saphira, and Arya turned to him with watery eyes. It was the second time that day he saw her crying, which was odd since she was usually very composed and strong. You made this for me. It wasn't a question. Well, it's not the palace I swore I would build for you once, but you already have one that I don't think suits you very much. I mean, it's your family's house, and I don't want to disrespect their memory, but he caught himself in mid-sentence, realizing his nervousness. And I'm rambling. I'm sorry. You don't have to say anything. We can go to the mountain and forget about it, she frowned. You don't get to say what to do with my gift, Eragon. It's my gift, she said in a commanding voice before adding in a more loving one. And I love it, he smiled, unsure. Really? You haven't seen it on the inside yet. Arya smiled back, and I already love it. She held her hand out for him, which he took, and they walked inside. The house was round, sung from the trunk of a not-so-tall but large tree. It had 2 floors, the first one being on the ground level that was bigger and formed a base for the second one. Eragon unlocked the door and let Arya in. There she found a wide space where living room, study, kitchen and dining room were all combined, differentiated only by the decoration. A little step also separated the dining area from the social area. Eragon couldn't tell from Arya's first reaction what were her impressions, but he let go of her hand so she could walk around examining everything, beginning from the left in the kitchen. She opened the cabinets and made a positive remark about the flower vases on the windows that faced the river. The circular windows, that were many by the way, were an important feature, for it surrounded the entire house, bringing light inside. Under the windows, there was a wooden counter with utensils and pans of all sorts. Everything she needed to cook a good meal Arya could find there. The kitchen floor was made of polished stone, and it appeared clean and sober, like the rest of the first level. She passed by the wooden table for 6 people and stepped down to the living room. There, Eragon watched her feeling the pillows on the green couch and then smiling at the faith placed on the fireplace mantel. It showed her and Saphira, just their silhouettes, looking at the sunrise many years before, when they were on their way to Elismera for the first time. He thought the image was so significant and beautiful and wondered if she remembered that day. He voiced his question, to which she smiled even greater and said, "It's one of my fondest memories. Next to it was another one." It made Eragon approach her and touch the corners of the stone where the image was imprinted. I took the liberty to make a faith of it. I hope it's all right. I don't ask the Eldenari to show your life to me. In fact, I ask them to avoid doing it altogether, but they do it nevertheless. He explained, and for the 3rd time tears fell from her eyes. The faith contemplated Islanzadi and Evander holding Arya as a newborn in the gardens of the Tealdari Hall. It was a fast memory the Eldenari had shown him a few years before, but it was enough for him to engrave it in stone for her. I'm sorry if I crossed the line. He whispered, afraid that he had hurt her by opening an old wound. She looked at him and shook her head. You didn't. Arya grabbed the faith and took it to the couch where she let herself sink. Eragon leaned on the fireplace and crossed his arms on his chest. You know me well. When you said I only knew the product, not the process, now I understand. You need to know someone to really love them. And you know me, she pointed at the image. Eragon nodded and smirked. And now you know me. Arya seemed to pick up what he was implying because she smiled, wiping her tears, but kept looking at the faith. Did you bring me here just to make me cry?" Eragon laughed and grabbed the faith from her hands to put it back on its original place. Next, he led her to the study, where Eragon had built a tall bookcase that went from the ground to the ceiling with a rolling ladder that Ari. It made her eyes gleam with excitement. Since he finished planning the house, he started to order books from all over Alagaezia for her, and the merchants would bring them directly to him. Jowd helped him with the rarest manuscripts. Some of the books and scrolls were original work from the residents of Anga, especially the riders. Eragon himself had contributed with a great number of poems of stories written specifically for her private library. Eragon. "This is fantastic. I had time on my hands." He laughed and shrugged. She also enjoyed the desk and the chair placed in front of a big window that allowed her to look outside at the garden. She fixed her eyes on the flowers, and he had to pull her out of there and said she was spoiling the second part of the surprise. Ready to see the bedroom? He pointed at the upper floor, to what she agreed unwillingly, still peeking through the window. They climbed the spiral staircase that's situated between the dining room and the study. Eragon went first, and when he got there, he rushed to open the thin layer that closed the opening to the balcony. It was the same type of layer used in Elismera, very effective in protecting the inside from the elements. A fresh breeze came in, which indicated that they wouldn't suffer too much with the heat that summer. When he turned to make that comment to Arya, he found her enraptured by the paintings on the wall. Rainier painted those, he explained. There were 3 big paintings hanging on the wall opposite the balcony above the bed. They were made in cloth, for it would be impractical to try to hang framed pictures on curved walls. They are beautiful. The one on the left displayed Illyra in the way Eragon didn't know. It was current, well developed, and in ascension. Rainier painted with his own hands, not his magic and mind, and it made it imperfectly brilliant. The way he portrayed the morning light hitting the emerald towers was a true work of art. The one to the right was a rendition of Mount Anga during the snowfall. He knew Arya had never seen it that way, and would never see it if she would come only for the games during the summer. He requested that image for that particular reason, and because it was breathtaking, the real one, but also the one made of paint. She turned to look at him, and he saw she was in awe. "Is it really like this in the winter?" "Less dramatic," he commented, what made her laugh. "But yes, that's how it looks like. You should see it sometime." She didn't respond, and it made him sad. He wanted her to stay, of course, but if it wasn't possible, then she could at least come more often. He always wondered if the matters of the crown would make it so difficult for her to travel the way she made it seem. Maybe it was just her indisposition to come, and the house would make her want to come more often and even see how Anga looked like during the winter. The painting directly above the bed showed Elismera, the crags of Telnia more precisely. Eragon had shown Rainier a memory of Glida resting on the crags at twilight, and the young elf painted it with such emotion that Eragon didn't know whose emotion it was, Rainier's or his own. Arya must have felt it as well, because she stepped closer to the wall to see it in detail. At that one, she didn't make any remarks, and Eragon was sure she was holding back her own emotions again. She simply shook her head and looked around. He watched her glide her hand on the soft mattress of the big bed and walk to the dresser. The drawers were empty except for the bottom one that contained fresh sheets and blankets. She opened the wardrobe, also empty. A frown creased her forehead. "They're empty," she said. Eragon was confused about her confusion. "Well, yes. You just arrived." "Why? What did you expect to find in there?" She hesitated, then looked away. Eragon thought he saw embarrassment on her expression. "I don't know." "I thought, what is it, Arya?" He came closer to her. "Nothing." It was nothing. She smiled softly and got away from his stare to go to the balcony. The space surrounded the entire upper level since it was composed by the roof of the first floor. From the outer walls of both levels, that were the trunk of the tree, vines and other plants would fall, painting the house in dark green. Being outside felt fresh and sheltered, for the treetop was very full and cast a big shadow down below. The rustling of the waters added a calming effect that Eragon knew Arya would enjoy. Watching her hair dancing with the breeze as she sat on the ledge had the same effect on him. Eragon went to stand at the balcony door. "So, what did you think?" "I loved it," she said without turning to see him. Her voice sounded sad somehow, so he came to sit by her side. "What's the problem then?" Arya took a minute to answer, but when she did her expression was pained. "A month isn't enough. It wasn't fair that I had 10 years to miss you. Now I'll have 10 years to miss this place as well. I know this will become home for me, and then I'll become desperate to come back, more than I normally am." She stared at him. "You trapped me." It wasn't a serious accusation, because soon she smiled graciously and leaned in to kiss his lips. "You haven't even seen the garden yet," he said in her mouth, causing her to pause and look at him with beaming eyes.